Hello guys, welcome again to another session of the Life After Death Summit on my channel. If you have been joining me so far in the last few days, thank you so much for all of your support and comments and just holding the space for us to have these really important conversations. Yeah, we really have gone through quite a journey in the last 2 days, going from dealing with death and the anxiety around death and the fear around death and how this can be transformed, and also going into near-death experiences and hearing from people who have had near-death experiences and have gone onto the other side and then came back to really have had incredible experiences that they managed to share with us online live, which was really incredible to hear. And today we're getting really a lot more into the nitty-gritty of what actually happens with the soul once they've transitioned through death, and which I'm sure a lot of you probably have many questions about and want to find out more about. And it's really a topic that hasn't really been discussed and has been brushed under the carpet for a long time, but I think it's fair enough to say that we all want to find out more about what really happens after death. And especially with this year 2020, there's been so many losses and so much grief. I think it's yeah, I think a lot of people actually want to question this now and want to reveal a lot more to the picture than we all know there actually is, that we're being told. So thank you so much for being here. I hope you can stick with us until the very end, because we're going to be discussing really incredible information, really potent and powerful information with my incredible guest today. So yeah, make sure you save your questions for the end as well. And just to give you a little bit of an introduction for those of you who may not have heard of his work before, I'm really honored to have with me today my special guest, Terry Sullivan. And this is not only a special interview because of the incredibly powerful work that he does around the world, but also because I've personally been taught by him and have experienced some of the profound just potency of his work and the amount of transformation it's able to do for many people around the world, and also those who have passed on. So to give you a little bit of background about him, he is a soul rescuer and a shaman practicing spirit release, land and sacred healing. And he has been doing this for over 40 years, and his work has been widely sought after from all over the world. Terry uses ancient techniques and with tried and tested contemporary methods of healing, dowsing and energy balancing to clear powerful negative energies and hauntings, as well as to heal ancestral and family influences, and also to liberate people from the ties of family trauma. Terry's work and his teachings has established satellite teams all over the world of soul rescuers, specifically in the UK, Australia, and South Africa. And his work draws on ancient traditions of wisdom, ranging from Celtic shamanism to native Indian rituals, to meditative disciplines of Tibetan Buddhism and also Eastern mysticism. And due to his reputation among South African healers, the elders of the Sangoma tradition, Terry has been recognized and initiated into the tradition, giving him the Zulu name Jabulamanzi, which means opener of doors. And he's also the co-founder with his wife Natalia of the incredible course called the Soul Rescuers Foundation course. And also he's the co-author of the book called Soul Rescuers, and is now actually writing his new book with Natalia called Soul Retrieval, if I'm correct. That's correct, right? Soul Retrieval.
No, that's not correct. No.
That's not. Oh, does it not have a name yet?
It was initially, we were sort of talking about doing one on soul retrieval, and then the editor said, no, we're not going to do that anymore. So it's more to do with the ancestors.
Oh, okay. Apologies.
Anyway, sorry for interrupting you there, but I thought,
no.
You know, if I don't, everyone out there is going to be thinking, what's this book on soul retrieval?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So we're yet to hear about the name of the book then. Yeah. So that's, yeah. So yeah, again, well, Terry, thank you so much for being here and joining me today, and for joining me in this Life After Death Summit. It's incredible to have you. And yeah, I think the conversation we're about to have, as you just mentioned previously, is definitely one that needs to be had and one that is way overdue as well. So thank you so much for joining me. It's really an honor to have you on my channel.
It's really a pleasure, you know, because any opportunity they get to talk about this subject, it's important because people are not prepared to die. And if you're not prepared to die, it's like standing at a station with a load of destinations and you've got no ticket. You don't know which train to get on. You don't even know which platform to go to. And, you know, I look at children being born, of which I have 3 myself, and it was marvelous. You know, there's an incredible support system for the birth of children. And if you want to get married, you know, these rites of passage, you can go to any church, any tradition, and you can get married. There is so much support. But when it comes to death, there isn't really enough understanding. And when I say that, just to fill you in on a story, when my late father died, he was buried by the canon of the Church of England. Chatting to the canon prior to the burial, he actually confessed to me he didn't know what's going to happen to him when he died. And this is a man who was representing pastoral for England. And I heard that, to be fair, very worrying.
Yeah.
I'm obviously, you know, there are priests within the Church of England who do know a lot about the afterlife, but it seems to me evidence that this information isn't shared all around.
Yes, and which is exactly why we need to be having these conversations and just sharing this information, because there's just so much fear around death, and that's, you know, the topic that's been in all of the themes in the interviews so far, is that, and it's not just that there's so much fear, but that it's so traumatizing for people both dying and living. And so
well, you know, this pandemic is probably the worst thing that we've had since going to war in this country, and so people are living in fear of death. I mean, I see it even where I live in my local village. There are people completely freaking out, especially those who are already suffering from anxiety or some psychological condition or emotional condition. Of course, this will exacerbate that because even bigger. And if you have a that's so massive and you can't shift it away, it's like carrying the weight of the world on your shoulder.
Yeah, yes, definitely. And obviously that in itself has a huge effect as to what happens to the spirit once they do cross over to the other side, which we can get into a little later in the interview. And I know you have a lot to say about that. But yeah, was there anything you want to say?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of things I want to say, you know, talking about the spirit.
Let's go back a little bit to the beginning of how you got into this this whole field, because I'm sure a lot of people would want to know a little bit more about how what it was like growing up as a psychic and having the abilities.
Well, I suppose, you know, as a kid, I was exceedingly lucky because I was born just after the war. But of course, with all the bombing and stuff like that, there wasn't too many places to live. There was a lot of sort of housing blocks and things were blown down. So I ended up sleeping with mum and dad for the first 7 years of my life. So any experience I may have seen, it was in the bedroom where they would be. A dose that passed my way. You know, you sort of wonder what it is, but then it becomes second nature. I mean, I have a story of who's a Caribbean lady. She, at 25, was taken to a funeral for the first time. And while she was there, she saw the people who were physical and the people who were shadows. And she thought that they could all see each other. And of course, you know, unless you are exceedingly psychic and clairvoyant, you are not going to be able to see the other world at all. But I mean, that is a communication which people can develop. You can develop clairaudience, which is the hearing of spirit, and clairsentience, which is more obvious. It's sort of sensing atmospheres when you walk into them to know whether they're going to make you comfortable or not. Yeah. You know, you talk about a haunted house, for example, and there are spirits in haunted houses, but they will stay in haunted houses unless somebody comes along to help them to move on.
And that's something that we touched on a little bit in the previous interview, which is that, you know, while some spirits do move on into the light, and there's some that do remain stuck. And that's why it's so important to be having, again, this kind of conversation, and to allow people to see that there's not you know, that they don't have to fear death, and that there is help and support on the other side, which being in this field, of course, you learn more about.
I go back, you know, sort of reeling forward from my childhood. I really didn't have any experiences with ghosts when I was going through my teenage years. I don't recollect sort of seeing anything in particular. But in my early 20s, when I moved to Richmond in London, I'd gone to bed one night, sleeping in bed, woke up in the middle of the night because I thought we had a burglar. And I looked around, and there was this guy as broad as daylight was standing at the end of my bed. And I really did think he was a physical person standing there. And it was quite amusing, but it freaked me out at the time, because it had been a long time since I'd seen anything so clear cut as that. So, you know, I think people do have encounters with the other side, but they often don't realize they have, because I witnessed it, as I could see that ghost as clearly as I can see you today. Mm-hmm. But, you know, a lot of people have an experience where this like shadow flicker passes the eye, the side of the head. And you think, what was that? That is usually a spirit that's passing you by.
Yeah. And a lot of us, I guess, I mean, we're so close up to this world that we kind of just tend to ignore any little thing that we do get. So because we're so focused on this physical world and the physical reality that a lot of
you know, I mean, that's fair enough, because people are living in the physical world. But the thing is, it is terminal to live in this physical world. It comes to an end at some time or another. And again, we get back to, is one prepared for that particular time? Certainly my parents weren't. And certainly Natalia's parents weren't, my wife, Natalia. So we have 4 people there who, during their transition, each transition was different. And whether it was supported or not by the system is questionable. So how does the system support somebody to die compared to the system supporting somebody to be born? This is where the weakness, you know, there is no one, or in very few cases, is there someone there who is saying, you know, you are going to go to a really nice place. Prepare yourself to go to a nice place. So a lot of people are going to die in fear. They're going to die in confusion. They're going to die in, obviously, in trauma, if they're actually killed in some nasty way. So you know, it's what you think, who you are. That is what you become over the other side.
Yeah. So it's kind of like your personality still stays with you, and when you move into the other side, isn't it?
Well, just to explain what actually happens is that when you pass out of the physical body, it is like a sheath. So it's no different to the transition of becoming a butterfly. But if you had that coat of many colors like a butterfly, then you would soar into the heavens. But most people, when they die, they are finding themselves in what's called an astral cloak. And this astral cloak, it identifies you as identical to the person who were prior to death. So if you die at 75 and you look like a 75-year-old, when you go over the other, you immediately take on that persona, because that is the recollection. So when you become an astral person, you can be stuck in that grey matter. You have to have some sort of recognition. Talking of NDE, for example, when people may see the light, is always a window of when somebody dies. But that glimmer of light is only there temporarily. So if you miss the opportunity to go into that light, then you get left behind. And that is what we call earthbound. And it is the earthbound souls that people like myself are concerned with in terms of being a social worker, really, a care worker, of going around collecting them and helping them to move on to a place of safety. And this is what I've done as a soul rescuer for the last 40 years.
Yeah.
No doubt you would be curious how it all started. Soul rescue. Through the spiritualist, of course. In my hometown, I sort of sat in psych development classes and so on and so forth. Found I was pretty good doing that sort of stuff. So when I moved to London, I then almost immediately joined psychic development groups, which then turned out into rescue teams. And this is how the rescuing of souls of the dead was introduced to me. And so, you would get a group of maybe 7 of us in one room, and you would have 2 channels who would allow a spirit to come in. So this person could have been deceased for 10, 15, 30 years, and they would be allowed to come in and transmit their voice towards the group of 7. And you would realize by the conversation that they did not know that they were dead.
And that happens.
Sorry.
Yeah, that happens.
This happens. And so, so many people go over the other side. They don't know what to do. So they're led to a rescue circle like this. Try to explain to them that they are dead. Once the penny drops that they are dead, then they have the recognition. They have an adjustment in psychology. So there is an immediate shock. A lot of the time, there's an immediate shock. Oh my God, I didn't realize I died. And then once they sort of mature out of that, they then find their place in as the biblical reference says, in my Father's house, there are many mansions. And so you will be allocated to a place which is based on your own vibrational frequency. So if a person is, for example, dense in their frequency, they would pass over the other side, and they would gravitate to a dense level. This is what you might call, in Catholic terms, you might call this a state of purgatory. It's a state of limbo. But then, of course, if you have a higher vibrational level, then you will gravitate etherically into the light. And this is when you move from the gravitational pull of the earth. So the gravitational pull of the earth is what keeps us here physically. But when you move into the astral body, this is connected to the gravitational pull of the earth. Unless you have this disconnect, you are still subjected to the gravitational pull. And that is where it becomes a little bit complicated, because the teaching is necessary. People who meditate, for example, you are meditating so that you can find a higher frequency inside yourself. If you're following Buddhism, you are looking for some form of enlightenment, samadhi. And if you are looking within the Church of England for some sort of spiritual reunion, if you are going through the forgiveness program and reconciliation and so on and so forth, then you will feel that redemption. And with this, you can allow yourself to feel that you are worthy to go into the light. And it's preparing yourself in all manner of ways. There is no one way. There are, many, many, many ways up the mountain, but viewed from top, same.
Yeah. And which is why you talk a lot about in your work about the importance of this preparation and really coming to terms with forgiveness, with making sure that you've forgiven everyone that you need to, and release yourself from any baggage or any burden that might be holding you back, which is obviously what translates into the other world and might be the very things that hold you back from hold the spirit back from progressing.
I mean, I look at the word forgiveness, and it's a word which is a complicated one, because it's okay if you punched little Johnny on the nose when you were 12, and you can forgive you for being on the end of your fist, as it were, you know. But the thing is, there's a lot of forgiveness. You don't know what has happened in your life. So when somebody says, forgive something, you may not even know what you're supposed to be forgiving. So you turn that around, forgive yourself, unconditionally forgiving yourself. And if you are forgiving yourself, you are honoring yourself rather than beating yourself up because you've done something wrong. And it's when you are filled with wrongdoings, you are filling yourself with a negative frequency. So when you do pass over, feeling very negative, your vibrational level is going to keep you down rather than go up. I've seen many, many examples dying. You know, that they feel so sorry for themselves that it's not going to heal when they get over the. You have to prepare. You have to work it out while you're in. You have this physical body to work out, to work through anything that arises, so that you can feel comfortable in preparing yourself for when you're back with the ancestors.
And that goes very much in line with people who I've spoken to who are, you know, so midwives or doulas. They do always mention how people who are close to their death are really willing to open up and wanting to communicate with someone and to kind of express those emotions that have been stuck in them, because I guess it's it's in our nature to want to release ourselves from these things. So I guess deep down we do know that we have to do that in a way before we transition. So that
you talk about soul midwives, and of course they do incredibly brilliant work. You know, we could do with about 10 million soul midwives in this country, because these are the people that actually I can't go too for every credit, because they are the difference. They make the difference for the transition. They are doing the job that the priesthood ought to. And, you know, the thing is, you get into religion, you get stuck in dogma. And when people become dogmatic, their views become a little bit resistant. So whether they are willing to change and adapt and adjust old habits, you know, old habits die hard unless people remain open-minded. You know, and the older we get, and, you know, speaking as an old fuddy-duddy, you know, I can tell that as I get older, there are certain resistances in me that I would have not seen at 20, 30, 40, you know. But it's living with who you are and allowing yourself to change all the time.
Yeah, and being open, isn't it? Being open to the idea that there is something else after death, and just being willing to accept that. Yeah, and so you've worked. I'm guessing you've met thousands and thousands of spirits on the other side, and that you've helped to transition. What are the main things that are? I mean, you briefly mentioned it, but what are the main things that are keeping them stuck in terms of? I'm really interested with regards to the religious go into heaven and hell. And,
in a nutshell, unfinished business. In a nutshell, it is unfinished business. And the unfinished business can occur prior to death. It can occur after death. Just as an example, it can occur prior to death, simply because somebody feels that they need to finish a job. Or you could have a grandma who feels that their daughter isn't capable of looking after the grandchildren. So without her assistance and help being provided, everything is going to go horribly wrong. And so suddenly she has a stroke, dies within 24 hours. And so that is the opinion that she died with. So she is still going to feel that she needs to hang around, stay behind to look after the grandchildren. Even though her daughter can't see her, she will try to interrupt in the daughter's lifestyle so that she can have an opinion. She still has a voice. So is bound spirit. And then, of course, you will get those who have a will that is contested. And of course, the will is not contested until the person died. So they don't expect their will to be contested necessarily, but when it is contested, they get a big attitude that, you know, I've written this will, that is what I wanted, why is it being contested? So this is what draws them back. So it's the detachment, the disconnection, it's, you know, it's having to let go of and not hold on to anything. Yeah, I mean, I've got a massive record collection, for example, which I love, but I can't take it with me. So I've got to put that in my will to one of my children, you know, and it's no point if he decided or she decided to sell it a week after I died, there's no point me getting up in arms.
Yeah.
You know, it's when you go over the other side, you have to let go. I saw an excellent example of this with my mother-in-law when she passed away 3 years ago. She literally dared out of sight. She did not hang around anyone. She went straight into the loving ancestors who were waiting for her. She went into a period of rehabilitation and restoration so that she could. The Greeks had this brilliant term of the bridge of Lethe in ancient Greek mythology, and it's the bridge of forgetfulness. So it is, the sooner you can forget, the better you can get on with a renewal. And then you can look at things from a different perspective. So my mother-in-law now, she comes and goes. She will come on high days, holidays, you know, the kids' birthdays and things like that. But she will put in an appearance and then she will leave. So it's just like having the mother-in-law, the best mother-in-law in the world, really, because she's doing all the right things, but she isn't interfering.
Yeah. So she's not in to help out and to say hi, basically.
Indeed. Indeed, and we can have prayers for her on her birthday. In fact, her birthday was recent, so we light a candle. We had a wine and said cheers. You know, we can honor. We also in our society, unlike in various tribal cultural societies. I mean, for instance, in Mexico, you've got the Mexican dead, where the whole of the ancestral lineage are honored. I mean, you look behind me, and this is all my official Sangoma stuff. So in Africa, within the Sangoma tradition, there is an honoring of the ancestors, but we don't do that anymore. We put somebody in the ground, and then within 10, 15, 20 years, we don't take flowers to the grave. We don't even know where the plot is. And so, you know, we can become so selfish in the way we are living our lives without respect from where we come from.
And by honoring, this is really one of the ways in which we can help our ancestors as well to move on, isn't it? By honoring them and remembering their names and remembering what they did. Yeah,
you do. You remember the names, and this is the honoring. You know, it's no accident that we have Michael, Big Apple, and in America we get George the First, Third, and Fourth. You know, within the generations, and it's an honoring going forward, which we should have the same remedial action of honoring going back. And this is the wheel of life, and it's being oiled. It's going round. You've got a mutual respect for everyone. And that respect is only coming back to you because the ancestors are honoring you. I mean, to become a Sangoma, for example, you know, whatever initiations one has to go through, when you are entitled to a name, such as Jabulamanzi, that you announced so accurately earlier, have to go with a bona fide Sangoma, an elder. in the little place of ancestors, which has an altar, and the Sangoma communicates with the ancestors, and the ancestors give them the name that you have. And Jabulamanzi, as you quite rightly said, opener of doors, but it is actually priest, opener of doors. So within that tradition, I'm a bona fide priest. Not that I ever use that as a title in this culture, because I get into trouble.
So, well, yeah, speaking of which, tell me a little bit more about your role as a soul rescue, and really what are you doing in helping people, souls on the other side, to transition? How does that work, and why do they need someone outside to come through to help them?
You know, the thing is, I think we have to talk about the body. We have a physical body, and as already explained, there is an astral body. And these bodies work at certain frequencies. The physical body is a dense frequency. And this is why we are looking to engage with the spirit body in its pure form, not the astral body, but the spirit body in its pure form, because this is a much lighter vibration. So what you have is a number of frequencies which are emitting from your own body, but this is also a magnetic field. So as a magnetic field, pretty much like you have the atmosphere around the Earth, what comes into the atmosphere is going to drop down. It has to. It's magnetic pull. And so the rainbows, it is going to become attached to my aura, then help them. If they're a million miles away, literally speaking, 10,000 miles away, they're living in Venezuela. But I could communicate with them, let's say through a photograph, and bring them in. Because magnetically, and the thing is, you know, as a Sangoma or as a shaman, a bona fide shaman, you have to be able to travel out of the body. Because within shamanism, let's talk about Celtic shamanism, you have the lower world, the middle world, and the upper world. So you have to be able to travel into all these worlds. If you cannot leave your body and work in the other world, or get the other world to come to you and work with you, you are not a shaman. Because that is the policy of a shaman, and it's in a number of ways inherited. So it's recognizing that you have all these frequencies which are going out, and when you communicate up, you are communicating into the light. So that is what we might call the kingdom of heaven, paradise, and nirvana. And when you connect down, you are going into the underworld. That's an assortment of different things, policies, which I won't go into because it's
another topic.
Suggestion. But the middle world is where people lie and they find themselves allotted. And within our body, we have what's called a chakra system. It's an Ayurvedic term. It's been known in this country really since it was introduced by the Theosophical Society back in the late 1800s, Annie Besant and people of that nature. But the chakra system is connected vibrationally to these kingdoms that I've been talking about, the lower world, the middle world, and the upper world. And this is why people meditate to go up, because they are taking the power of these chakras from the bottom to the top, so they're connected into the density, because we have to be. The spine is a tree, and it roots into the ground. That is our tree of life or tree of knowledge. And so the branches that you may see on me, the branches are reaching out, and each has a frequency. The roots are reaching down into the underworld, into the underground, and they also have frequencies. And so what we have is these lines of travel. And it's pretty much like this web. The aura, which is a magnetic field, is very much like spider's web. And as you see a spider traveling over its web in different directions and repairing its web, indeed, when need be, so a shaman can travel in different directions because they understand the web of life. And this is traveling through this web, you can rescue in any place that you wish to travel to go. So if you hear of a story of somebody who's become lost at sea and you can locate them, you can take their spirit out of water. Somebody who's been burned by fire, you can take their spirit out of fire. And for example, who would have been my uncle, who was killed in the Second World War, when he died, the report was that he was blown to smithereens, 1,000 pieces. That's what his officer told my grandmother. And so I didn't think anything about this at all, but I knew that I'd communicated with my deceased grandfather. He died in 1960-61. So as soon as I started to develop, I became aware of him being around. And some years later, maybe 20 years, he brought his son, my uncle, Freddie, and he'd rescued him from Burma. And when he turned up, Freddie was shaking like a jelly. So what is that telling you? It's telling you that the physical body was blown to pieces, but also it affected so seriously the spirit. And the spirit could not move on because the spirit was dying in a state of shock. And so, trauma, warfare, things like this is why the world is filled with ghosts. And as the Dalai Lama says, if we could clear the astral of ghosts, then the world would be a much lighter place. And it's absolutely accurate. Mm-hmm. So these are small stories, and this is why we have to raise our vibration and try not to die a traumatic death, because it's not really helpful.
I did, yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, no, thank you for sharing that with us. I think it's such a great example to explain how it works with death and how that transitions over to the spiritual world as well, and also why your role as a soul rescuer is so important to help those spirits who are still suffering from the death and can help hopefully move them on into the light. So how does that next part work? Because I know you bring in a lot of angels and guides and ancestors. So tell me a little bit more about how this part works of the soul rescue.
Well, as a soul rescuer, I also want to include spirit release as a terminology here. The only reason that we call ourselves soul rescuers is because when our book was to be published 20 years ago, the editor said, give us some names and we'll choose one. And that was 1 out of 20. So we then used that as a platform. But Spirit Release, I was a member of Spirit Release, which was originally British Association for Spirit Release, BASR. That was an interesting body because it was bringing together people like myself from different backgrounds. The chair was a consultant psychiatrist, for example. We had another psychiatrist on the committee. We had, it sort of broke into two institutions. So you had the scientific backdrop, and then you had the people like myself and Susanna McAnally, who was then the president of the College of Psychic Studies. So we were in one camp. We understood each other implicitly, wondering why the fogies over there were sort of doing things so slowly. Because they were looking into rescue work from a psychiatrist's viewpoint, and they knew that the magnetic field, there could be an attachment in the magnetic field which could affect the brain. So what they would do is that they would take the person into almost hypnotic state and then regress them to identify the nature of the problem, and often it would appear to be a spirit that would give their name, which would be entirely different. So the physical body is hosting another being unbeknown to itself, because all it's feeling is the actual condition of unwellness. And so when you have an attachment like this, of course, that attachment has its own personality, so it can superimpose on the person who is resisting it. I mean, I get this all the time because I deal with spirits all the time. So every time one comes in, my personality will change. My voice may change, you know, but that's because I channel spirits. And people who do this work, you know, I mean, I've seen in the Santeria tradition, pure trance, where you have the spirit come into the body, and there is only the evidence of the spirit who is there, and they are in total control. And when they leave the body and the actual owner of the body comes back in place, the physical body is absolutely exhausted, because that is what the intrusion has done. And of course, you get this in tribal cultures where people dance and they build up the rhythm until eventually their body is occupied by spirited place, or what they would refer to as a deity. So, you know, there are so many ways of using. I'm trying to explain that the body is picking up atmosphere's energies, whether it is trained to do so, whether the tradition, or whether unsuspectingly somebody gets caught out.
Yeah.
You know, like the grandma coming back and interfering with the daughter to look after the grandchildren. You know, if they have good intentions and they're on a similar understanding, that's okay. But if there is a clash of personalities, then that is causing difficulties in the psychological, emotional profile of the person who's trying to mother her own children.
And which is why you speak a lot about in your work the importance of really knowing yourself, and so that when we know ourselves, we can kind of see, you know, if we are actually being influenced by other energies that are outside of us. And so then if we are, then we can correct it and, you know, either call on someone like you or try to clear it in some sort of way. But yeah, that's again very important.
Well, I think, you know, it's hard enough because we are a spirit coming into a body, and we inherit a DNA which may be in conflict with what we're feeling internally. We are going up, and we are being manipulated by these circumstances into which we have been born. And it suits a lot of people, of course, but there are those who are a bit rebellious, like myself, and feel, you know, I've got a body and I've got a spirit, and my spirit is in disagreement with the habits which have been a part of the body profile. So this is learning to understand that you have inherited from granddad, grandma, and these ingredients in your own personality. If you're happy with them, then you are happy with your heritage. But a lot of people are born to be like the black sheep of the family, as an example, or just feel that they're born in the wrong time, in the wrong place, and they just do not fit in.
Yeah. And what advice would you give to people like that who might, you know, be listening to this and thinking, oh, this kind of fits me. I feel like I'm the black sheep of the family. What advice would you give to them to kind of...
Well, invariably, these people, they seek to find some sort of resolution for themselves. So many will take a spiritual journey. You know, many may pilgrimage or go to an ashram. They may feel that they just want to leave the family and find themselves. They become a traveler, just around the world. And of course, there will be those who are so damaged that they could take a negative pathway, you know, maybe into addiction.
Yeah, but it's important to recognize that, you know, normally the black sheep of the family tend to be those who are actually the healers of the family as well, isn't it? So they, by connecting with that spiritual side, they can actually reveal for themselves that they have that sort of a purpose to maybe heal the family tree, or to help somehow their family in some sort of way. I know we've spoken
Well,
a bit.
I mean, in some cases, but the thing is, to heal the family, you've got to get an agreement for the family to reconcile. If the family don't agree, then you are the black sheep, you are the outcast, and everyone's going to gossip behind your back. You know, you are the person that nobody really wants to know at all. And I've seen, you know, I've had a few clients down the years who are really the black sheep, and they have been totally isolated. You know, and even before this, when I first moved to London, I remember working with this guy, a storeman. I was in charge of this guy who was a storeman, and yet his brother was an earl. But his brother had inherited everything, and he was the black sheep and had to go down the second-hand shop to buy himself a new jacket. Yeah. You know, so in a million years, he would not have been able to reconcile the family because they had thrown him out. You know, and so the reconciliation will only come when you can go and say, look, it's a bit like the prodigal son who is welcomed home again. If you are not welcomed home after your journey, then you will always be misunderstood. Because your frequency, back to that word again, your frequency and your vibration is not on a parallel path with the mum and dad or the grandparents. So you're rubbing against the grain all the time.
Yeah. But we always have free will, isn't it, to change that at any time. So even if someone does go the wrong path at some point, which a lot of us do, then you can always kind of find your way back to you, into who you are and your purpose in this life.
Well, let me tell you this: for a lot of people who feel that they are misunderstood by the family, I can tell you, probably even when I was about 55 years old, my mother said to me, Terry, when are you going to get a proper job?
Yeah, I think.
So you know, there is no hope of a reconciliation. When somebody sort of looks at it in that particular manner. I mean, I can laugh at it now, but at the time I sort of frowned and thought, well, you know, I've been doing this now professionally for however long. Yeah. You know, I think I sort of started this work full time about 35 years ago. Before that, I was working part time. You know, had a day job as well.
Well, I guess, yeah, that all comes into the whole thing of, you know, just coming to terms that something just can't be changed. And for people who are preparing for the end of their lives, they can just kind of allow themselves to let go of these, whatever resentment or anything they might have been holding against their family. Because, of course, we all have these different perspectives. And I guess our parents will always hold the old vision, the old view, and the old perspective that we might not necessarily be at. So,
you know, everyone is born into their generation, and they must be a part of their generation. You know, my generation was the Beatles, Bob Dylan, and Rolling Stones. You know, that is my generation. And so there's a certain ingredients from that energy, that generation, which gives me a feeling of liberation and freedom, because that was the time I was brought up in. But if you were born into a generation of more restriction, such as my dad having to go to war, no choice, then of course he always looked at authority, because authority was something that was there when he was 17. So he could never change during his lifetime. The doctor was God. You know, that was the end of the line. He had a different status to a person who was, you know, a firefighter.
Yeah, certainly. But yeah, let's go back a little bit to the process of what happens to the soul after they've passed away. And so obviously we've spoken about how sometimes they can remain stuck due to unfinished business in this world. So what happens? So after that, what happens when they are finally greeted by, you know, their family, their ancestors, who are normally there to welcome them once they have released themselves, or someone like you who has help them to move on into the light? Who normally waits for us on that side, on the other side?
Who waits for you are those that love you. There is a negative downturn on this, those that hate you, but we won't go there today. That's to do with the dark side again. But you go to those that love you. And, you know, if you don't like someone in the physical world and you do not want to see them in the physical world, why on earth would you want to see them in the heavenly kingdoms? You know, so what you are doing is that you are going over the other side. The physical body is no more. You are leaving. You have the silken thread. It takes time for the silken thread to break down. And so you are heading into the arms of the ancestors. And if you feel that great love inside yourself, and that love is coming from them to you, then of course you are going to join them. And that is a beautiful moment when you see that happen. Quite often when I've rescued who've been young men died on the battlefields, and I reunite them with their mother, their grandmother, the sense of love and closeness is just an amazing feeling. It's a great joy. And if people can pass over feeling this joy that they are going to be welcomed and know that there is somebody waiting for them who is loving in that particular manner, then that is a wonderful thing. It's the people who feel that they have no one who cares for them. They feel lonely. They don't know what to do, where to go, and death is just doom and gloom. It's the best and the worst thing that can happen to them. Are they better off being miserable in the physical world, or is death the better ally? But the death is synonymous with life, because you go over and you will not change. So these are the people that I'm here to, you know, social work for, and collecting them and trying to get them to realize that they are dead. That is the first thing. And once you've done that, you awaken inside them an opportunity for them to see things a different way. And then you'll then have to try and connect up with someone who's going to be helpful. And once you've done that, they can be taken out of their unhappiness. And then moving, the unhappiness is the gloom which is holding them down. It is a frequency. We go back again, frequency, vibration. And if I can heighten their vibration, sometimes you have to remind them of what it was like when they were a child, when they had happy days or their wedding day. You are trying to inspire inside them some reason for them to feel joy in their heart. And this joy there is nothing else. Once you go into that joy, it's like you again become the butterfly and you move out of the astral chrysalis. And, you know, on battlefields, for instance, you can't deal where you have mass death. You cannot deal with people individually as a social worker in that way. So what invariably I would do is that I would create a stairway to heaven. So you are connecting angelic forces, the angelic powers. You are bringing that light into place, and you are bringing that light through you to spread out. So it's a blanket that covers the earth. And then depending on the tradition, if they're Christian, then of course you can use the Christian utterance, and anyone doing this work who is of a different understanding religiously or spiritually, then they would do it in their own way. But it's building up that light so that these guys who have died can actually gather, collect, and all look up collectively. And they all know what they're looking for because they all know who love them. And once they see the face of someone that loved them, they will go. And you will see en masse. It's like when you get one or two to go, they will follow. Specifically, if you have people working with you, spirits who are working with you, who are in an official capacity. So it's a good idea for me, if I'm working with soldiers, to have a soldier who is working with me, who knows that he is dead, who knows that he can help and assist, and he can set an example way they will follow the leader.
Mm.
There are so many rescues of rescuing souls of the dead, but you have to look at every individual situation as a case and work out the best method to use. And,
Yeah.
you know, it's also when you're on these battlefields, for example, let's talk about, you've got British, you've got French, and you've got Germans as three examples who may have been in the same conflict. The dead are lying all over the place. So you will also have interpreters in French and interpreters in German, so that you are helping everyone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're not looking at this personally. You don't take sides. You know, at this moment, I'm not an England football supporter. You know, I'm doing a job for everyone. It's
Yeah, so you have to stay very neutral and very much in the middle of everything.
You do, you know, because they're but for the grace of God. You know, everyone deserves to be given equal treatment, because this is, you know, we get back to the Dalai Lama. What the Dalai Lama is all about is compassion for all sentient beings.
Mm-hmm.
When my dead cat brushing against my leg, you know, I don't need to kick him. The compassion, but if my granddad had names, is going to come along and say hello, you know, or some other spirit who I am exceedingly familiar with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also, yeah, like you said before, it's very important to also have that spirit team behind you who are, you know, helping to manage the groups. You know, if there's a huge group of souls that you need to rescue.
It's impossible to work. I mean, I couldn't do it. You know, I just happened to be a front piece, you know, in a team which goes back like a pyramid, you know, and everyone is working exceedingly hard to do their job. And they are, you know, I see the spirits, they get exhausted. They have to take holidays. They have to take a break, because they are feeling, oh my goodness gracious, you know, it's been a hard day at the office, you know, and this hard day could have gone on for 2 years without a break. Holidays? I don't take holidays. And then suddenly they walk into a wall and it's a day.
Yeah. Well, but it's very, I think it's very comforting to know that also on the other side, there are so many souls who are working to help everyone else who is, who might not be, has reached the light or has transitioned fully into the light. So it's very supporting to know that.
Well, I feel, you know, whatever religious or spiritual belief a person may have, anyone who has a belief in an archangel or a saint, or in, you know, whatever you believe in, then say a few prayers, because the prayer will help to lighten the load. You know, this is what people did years ago. This is why the Catholics have a confession, because it is to lighten the load. Mm-hmm. You know, but you can do that yourself. You don't need the priest there to give you permission. Mm-hmm. You can lighten the load because you have enough love or compassion for yourself. Mm-hmm. So it's a case of feeling worthy or unworthy. You can't sit on the fence. Mm-hmm. Either you are worthy of God or whatever you believe in. In truth, I prefer that word, because then, you know, we've had God since the beginning of time, and the names have changed. You know, the ultimate thing is anyone who is speaking truth, what it's all about, being true to yourself. Mm-hmm. And saying through your truth, you know, I really am carrying this heavy load. I need some help. And if you don't ask, you don't get. Mm-hmm. And this is lightening your frequency and preparing your frequency. You know, it's like somebody who's working in a boring day job, and then at night they go to the disco. They let their hair down. Now, the frequency of the person who is in the day job and the frequency of the person who is in the disco is entirely different, because they have lifted their spirits. And it is an upliftment of the spirits. And this, again, coming back to the churches, it is the upliftment of the spirits which should be happening.
Yeah.
So the congregation is being uplifted. I mean, I remember singing hymns as a kid. I would find them uplifting.
Yeah.
And things that make you feel good. Playing music around the house is up.
Yeah, and I guess, and also I guess, for example, the Buddhist prayers, who they have specific prayers for death as well. That must be quite uplifting as well for the spirits.
Yeah, because I mean, it's Buddhist mantra, Mane Padme Hum. That is the Buddhist mantra of compassion. So that's the one I use, because that's, I mean, if you could see in front of me, look, I mean, you my Sangoma stuff behind, but I have a Tibetan tanka on the wall, which is behind the screen, and that is the goddess of compassion. And it is feeling that you have the compassion. Compassion is the best ingredient for everything. It's the salt and the pepper.
Yeah. Oh, really well put. Yeah, and then that's really the key thing, isn't it? That I guess if we can take away anything from this, is that if people just have this compassion for themselves and for others, preparation for death will be a lot easier, and a lot easier to transition into their lives as well.
Well, if we could all do that, we'd be down on a saying thank message. That's good, that would be a marvelous ingredient for people to just enjoy, because it would be to feel that you do have self-compassion. For instance, I think I should mention that anyone who wants to look and research into it, the Bardo is the Tibetan tradition. The Tibetan Book of the Dead, anything associated with the Tibetan Book of the Dead is worth a read, because it talks precisely about the first 49 days that happens in the afterlife.
Yeah. What's about that?
You don't have to agree with everything that's in there, but it's giving you highlights of what you might encounter.
Yeah, and it's really divided by the 7 days, isn't it? 7 days for each chakra to be to kind of open up and release. Is that what it's about? The 49 days?
In principle, it would be associated to the chakras, because it's looking into your entity chakra, as I've said before, different frequency. It's trying to bring an alliance between these frequencies, which are letting the soul free. So we're looking into the good things and the negative things about your incarnation, and then you gravitate to a place that is suitable. It sort of reminds me of when I was a kid, sort of being brought up in a fishing port. Kids I went to school with, when I was 6 years old, that was the first time I encountered one of the boys' fathers drowning at sea. The ship had gone down with all hands, fishing boat called the Gypsy Queen. And, the story that you have in these fishing ports of that time is that when a sailor drowns, he sees all his life coming before him. And then you pass out of the body and you can go into a safe place, because it's a reconciliation of sorts. And the drowning in water, I feel, is like a reconciliation, because that's where you came from in birth. You came out of the waters of your mother. So you're going back to that early memory, and you're going through a similar experience.
Oh, wow. That's really interesting. Yeah, so I guess, that's why there's always that link between birth and death, isn't it? There, it's still a transition for both things. In one, you're coming from the spirit world into the physical, and in the other one, you're going from the physical into the spirit world.
Well, it is a cycle. And, for people who believe in reincarnation, it's like a cycle. You could sort of use the emphasis as a wheel. so that you have the center bit of the wheel with the spokes and the outer rim. And so each incarnation is connecting you to the center, but you go onto the outer rim for the experience. And then you go round until eventually you've reached the top. And then once you've reached the top, you go into center. So, you know, it's the center is what we're looking for inside ourselves, because that is the seat of compassion.
Yeah.
I mean, it's if you look at the earth, it is the core of the earth where the mother lives, the mother of all things. This is, you know, if you're doing a shamanic journey, you can go into it. You can go into these areas so that you, by your own visual, by your own experience, you understand these things and they resonate inside you, because we have many more memories connected to us than we know. But if we hold on to the one body, onto the one life, all we do is that we have the memories of who we are since we were born, and we don't experience beyond. So, you know, shamanism gives you a great opportunity to look beyond yourself and experience things in an entirely different way. And having said that, I would not subscribe to anyone who does spirit journey on drugs, unless, like with ayahuasca, there are too many frauds. There are too many inexperienced people. And I have seen, and you know, we have witnessed deaths of people we know in this manner, because the ayahuasca as a ceremony, it's in the Amazon jungle. It's actually done with a tribal shaman with his own people. And that is like a secret society. And that secret society has been broken by people who are bringing the tradition, but not with the truth of the tradition in place.
Yeah.
You know, there are so many people who call themselves shamans, and they are not. And unless they can travel into the other world, they are not a shaman.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, I think that's really important to remember, especially with the with the well-known ayahuasca and all these psychedelic trips that people like to take and think they will be able to heal, but actually sometimes more damage can be done. So it's very important to make sure you're connecting with the right person who is actually what they say they are. So
they have to be bona fide. They have to really know what they're. You know, as a child of the 60s, there were so many people that did the trips on psychedelic drugs. I mean, you know, you could pick up a number of books. Timothy Leary, who sort of introduced this culture, if you like. But everyone knows that you have a great experience in the light. But the thing is, you will go down into the darkness, because this is the way it is. As high as you go, as dark as you go.
Yeah.
In the tree of life, I can only go as high as I can go, because I can go as dark as I can go.
Yeah.
And you know, in the story of Muhammad, for example, he went into the kingdom of hell and the kingdom of heaven. I can't remember which one he went to first, but he went to them both. So he had a great ability inside himself to reconcile his darkness and his light. And so the tradition that he has into the people, in its pure form, it is based on that truth of understanding the two levels of darkness and light, bringing them together as a truth, not as a conflict.
Yeah, and really having that balance, isn't it? Being in balance with yourself and with the light and the dark, which is also something you always teach. But yeah, well, speaking of this, kind of bringing it back to you know, everything that's happened this year with 2020 and so many losses and so many people grieving, what would you like to see? What do you think people can do now better in a way to you know, improve the way in which we die, especially in the Western world, the way in which we prepare to die, and our whole relationship with this death and with the spiritual side of death? What would you like to see ideally happen in our society?
It's the question is a difficult one to answer because I don't really have a stringent point. But what I do notice is that there are so many people in lockdown that are being affected so seriously by they're not used to being in silence. They're not used to being on their own. I mean, I'm an only child, so I'm used to being in silence. I'm used to being on my own. So for me to be in lockdown, I would find it considerably easier if I was on my own than somebody who was brought up in a family of 7. Because you would all have this, you'd have this community, you'd have this identity of having things going on all the time, when unless you were sort of individually going into your own private time, you wouldn't know what it was like. So I think, you know, the people who are being put in isolation by government rule of thumb, the government have actually got it all wrong by breaking up the communities. I understand the policy and the principle, and of course there is an issue there, but they are breaking minds and hearts of people.
Yeah, and it's very, very much the emotional side of things that is suffering, isn't it? People's emotional and mental health is really what's suffering with from everything. And of course, there's people that will argue against it, and I know it's a big topic on its own.
Yeah. Well, by their method of healing, they're causing more suffering. So is it really working? I don't know. You know, I'm not a politician. I don't know what the options are. If I were, you know, I'd be talking a different talk.
Different if you were.
You know?
Just in terms of like daily things that people can do, such as, for example, you know, bringing back a bit of the ancient rituals, and like you mentioned before, how the African traditions have this thing of the community and honoring the ancestors. Do you think if people were to embrace more of these tools and techniques of kind of reconnecting with the spiritual side, with their ancestors, do you think death would be a little bit more accepted and easier to deal with rather than how disconnected we seem to be from all of these ancient traditions normally?
Yeah, I mean, you know, people connecting with the ancestors, it's quite easy, really. Not so nowadays, because people don't have photographs they're all on a phone nowadays rather than on the wall. People who can put photographs on the wall, I mean, we have in our house a hallway where you see photographs of my family, Natalia's family, and we treasure these. So that's one way of connecting with the ancestors, simply because you are looking at their pictures, you're not forgetting them. And if you put up an altar, all you need is a little shelf, a fireplace, you know, somewhere small that you can just put a cloth down and maybe put some symbol, a religious symbol, spiritual symbol, something that suits you, and, you know, burn candles. If you want to use incense, you can do that. But it's the reverence of oneself and the reverence of the whole of life. This is what the shamanic tradition, this is what the Sangoma is all about. It's the reverence of all life. And so you are appreciative of everything that's out there and around you. You know, you can't change it, so you acknowledge it for what it is. And, you know, it's up to the individual to look for their own inner wisdom. It's the individual to seek the higher truth. And, you know, there are people like myself, I'm here really just to trigger in the individual. You know, I don't tell people what to do, but I live by example. And if they feel that there is something that I'm doing or awakened inside them, then it's something for them to develop and treasure. You know, I don't say I'm not a guru. I don't make people follow me. But they have an opportunity to be awakened and then go and do what they need to do. You know, it's like yourself going to South America as an example. You know, because you went there, it gave you a completely different perspective on the way some people live.
Yeah.
Like when I went to India or Africa, or, you know, or America, you're seeing examples of where people live. But anyone who wants to sort of understand the ancestors in a very simple way, I would recommend they watch the because it gives you
it broke.
Coco. Coco, yeah. Coco.
Oh, okay.
It's an animated movie made by Walt Disney, and it's about the Mexican Day of the Dead.
Oh,
and
yes.
What I'm saying, it gives people an information into what it is really like over the other side, and it's as close as anything I've seen about life over the other side as a community, rather than watching a movie like Ghost, where you've got a spirit who is doing physical things and one who's trying to imitate those physical things. That does happen. It's all real. But the Walt Disney take is much more fun. And much more, open-hearted, and you sort of come away with a glow on your face when you've seen it.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Happy ending. Ending.
Yeah, no, I agree. I've also seen it, and I think it's a really good representation, from what I know so far, anyway, of the other side. So yeah, that's also a really key element. Well, what you are speaking about in terms of the ancestors and having this this altar creating for them, it reminds me of what people now kind of do with gratitude list, although it's not directed to ancestors, but it's a similar thing in terms of appreciating what you have and being in the present moment and just kind of taking in whatever it is that's in front of you. So I guess there's sort of a link between that. So it's probably coming from the whole ancestral altar thing anyway. Yeah.
You just mentioned one word there, moment. It's always the same moment.
Yeah.
The same moment is past, the same moment hasn't come yet. And within that moment, that is where we find peace. If we don't find peace in a moment, then you don't find peace for a continuum of time. And it's looking for that peace. So you're putting an altar up so that you can look at that altar. You can spend 5 minutes. If you've got 5 minutes in your day, you can just look at that altar. You can close your eyes. And instead of praying, you can just focus into your breathing. And you can feel the peace. And you feel that peace inside. You then become aware of your physical body. And whether you have any aches and pains, whether you have any supplementary influence which are not to do with your physical condition at all, but you get an itch and a twitch on the left shoulder. What's that? And it's only for balance you become aware of it, that you are occupied by something. And this occupation by something may not be a disembodied spirit, a disembodied person at all. It could be just a shadow that you are carrying. Because all our thoughts that emit from our body, they are going to stay in the aura. So if we have a lot of upsets and downturns, then we are carrying the dark mood in the aura. So the aura is looking more like a black sky than it is a blue sky. Yeah. And so the going into the stillness and the self-awareness of bringing your stillness, you are creating a blue sky in your own aura. Yeah. You're bringing a certain peacefulness, a sanity back into your life. And it's calming the mind, because the ego will always have its opinions.
Yeah.
It's always going to come, shut me up, constantly telling my ego that. But it's not because it is what it is. It is Terry. And the inner person is Jabulamanzi. So this is the conflict, if you want to sort of give it names. But it's really the truth that is within, and the attitude of, you have been force-fed. Your brain is force-fed by everything that's happened in your life. And if you're happy with that, then that's hunky-dory. You could live with it. But if you've been fed with misinformation, disinformation, and things that you question, then of course you have to look at life on a broader spectrum, and that is learning to know who you are, and that is the self-discovery. Self-discovery now is creating for you your place in the kingdom of heaven. Mm-hmm. To enter into the kingdom of heaven through your passion, through your self-love, and just that vibrationally you are going to light, mm-hmm. so your spirit can soar. This is the whole preparation. That's what it's all about. The ghosts out there, the earthbound spirits and so on and so forth, yeah, they're my job. I deal with them all the time. But the people I'm trying to address here now are the people that could be out there with the right advice and the right lifestyles. They don't need to be out there. It's like, saying somebody who is convincing a person not to eat meat for their own virtuous approach, right or wrong. I don't have an opinion about that, but I do have an opinion about the welfare of somebody preparing to be in a place when they die. That is really what it's all about. Prayer, meditation, the altar, burning candles, all these things that, honoring, these are, you're honoring outside, you're honoring the ancestors, but you're honoring yourself. Honoring yourself, you are honoring the ancestors. And ancestors will give you support and love. And if you've got these moany old ancestors, then they can be dealt with in a completely different way because they're disorganized.
Yes, definitely. And we've already kind of gone into a few details on how that happens. But again, there's a lot more to the story that we can, I'm sure, discuss in other interviews. We have a lot of really comments from people saying it's very interesting and it's very, very helpful. Someone's actually asked, they're puzzled about where were the 4 billion souls actually living before they're rescued, I guess. Well, I'm not sure how they came about with the number 4 billion. I don't know if there's 4 billion souls out there, but I guess I just want to know, where do the souls exist before they go into the light? Like, where do they exist?
The thing is, these 4 billion souls that this person is talking about, it goes back into the ancient history. You have to look at the history of the world and the belief systems that the world was beholden to. We all died and we went back to the mother, we went back to the earth. I mean, if you look at Hinduism, 1,000 years old, this is a tradition which is looking up towards gods. But if you look at the Celtic tradition, you have an upper world, a middle world, and a beneath world. So the traditions looking up, they have only been relatively, so everything went back to the mother. So these billions that went back to the mother, they would have been, it depends if you believe in reincarnation, because if you do believe in reincarnation, you will know that they come out of the chrysalis and they are reawakened and they are magnetically drawn to reincarnate. If you believe in the one life, then of course you're talking about an entrapment. It's like with Christianity, who, some people believe that we're waiting for the trumpet call. And if that's the case, some people would have been waiting since 300 AD. So yeah, it's a question which has no simple answer.
As is pretty much the world of the spiritual world, isn't it? It's a Pandora's box that once you open it, there's just so much to unravel in there. But yeah, with that being said, thank you, Terry, so much for being here. It's been such an honor to have you and just to share this space with you and to have you share so much of your wisdom with us. So thank you so much for everything that's been said. Thank you.
Pleasure indeed. And thank you very much to your audience for bothering to listen, because without them, this could not take place. And thank you very much for having me on as your guest.
Thank you so much. And for everyone who wants to learn more about Terry's work, if you want to get in touch with him or with the Soul Rescuers group that he leads with his wife Natalia, you can visit www.soulrescuers.co.uk. All the information will be on there, and also you can get in touch with them through social media on Facebook, again Soul Rescuers, and Instagram Soul Rescuers. All the information will be in the description below. And I know you and Natalia are now doing a lot of online courses, which people can join. So from anywhere they are in the world, which is really great. So you don't have to. We've
been doing a lot of Zoom and Skype since lockdown, very successfully. It surprised us both how many people are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's so nice because a lot more people are now that are getting to know your work, and they're realizing, how much of a difference it's making, because I mean, you guys teach from everything from energy work to soul release to oracle card readings to communication with the ancestors. So it covers a whole range of topics. So definitely not for the faint-hearted. But yeah,
I wouldn't say it is for the faint-hearted, no.
But yeah. As I said, guys, thank you so much for joining us, for being with me and all of my guests so far. I hope you managed to gain something helpful out of this, out of all the interviews so far. And again, please do share them on your social media with anyone that you think might find this information helpful or might like to get in touch with any of my guests so far. So thank you so much for joining me. And again, Terry, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And until next time.
Big love.